Hey guys, it's Andy here, and welcome back to another episode of Deck Doctor. This is a Mardu Aristocrats deck, submitted by Aiokii, which I'm pretty sure is how you meant to say it. Essentially a Mardu Aristocrats deck. So we're just going to touch over his version of the deck, and then see what I did to improve it, and hopefully you guys enjoy the video. So to start off Aiokii's lineup, we have 4 copies of Cruel Celebrant, which is for 2. A white and a black. It's a 1/2 vampire, and it has whenever Cruel Celebrant or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Just the classic Aristocrats draining gain. 4 copies of Dark Confident in here for draw card. For 2, 1 and a black. It's a 2/1 human wizard. At the beginning of your upkeep, you reveal the top card of your library and put the card into your hand, and you lose life equal to the card's converted mana cost. 4 copies of Vexing Devil, which is for 1 red, a 4/3 devil. When it enters the battlefield, any opponent may have it deal 4 damage to him or her. If it does, sacrifice Vexing Devil. 3 copies of Phyrexian Obliterator in here as a huge 3 copies of Phyrexian Obliterator in here as a massive 3 copies of Phyrexian Obliterator in here is just a big bomb threat. For 4 black, it's a 5/5 horror with trample, and whenever a source deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that source's controller sacrifices that many permanents. 3 copies of Cartel Aristocrats, which is for 2, a 2/2 human advisor, but it also has a sacrifice another creature. Cartel Aristocrats gains protection from a color of your choice until end of turn. The namesake of the deck and one of the big enablers is the 3 copies of Athreos, God of Passage. For 3, he's a 5/4 legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible, and as long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7, he isn't a creature. And then whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. Just giving a massive amount of recursion to the deck, which is really good for these aristocrat style decks. 4 copies of Lightning Bolt in here for just straight up damage or removal. For 1 red, at instant speed you deal 3 damage to target creature or player. 4 copies of Path to Exile for 1 white, at instant speed you remove target creature from the game. Its controller searches his or her library for a basic land card, puts that card onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffles his or her library. 4 copies of Faithless Looting in here for the draw card. For 1 red, at sorcery speed, you draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards, and it also has flashback for 3. And 4 copies of Rally the Ancestors, which is for X and 2 white. At instant speed, you return each creature card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Exile those creatures at the beginning of your next upkeep, and exile Rally the Ancestors. That is the spells of the deck. Looking at the land base here, we have a shitload of man lands. So he's running 4 copies of Shambling Vent, which comes in tapped, taps for white or black, but for 3 you can make it a 2/3 white-black elemental with lifelink. 4 copies of Needle Spires, which is the red-white version of it, comes in tapped. Pay 4, it becomes a 2/1 red-white elemental with double strike. 4 copies of Lava Claw Reaches, which also comes in tapped, tap for black or red, and pay 3, it becomes a 2/2 with pay X, it gets plus X. 4 plains, 5 swamps, a single mountain, and a copy of Tomb of Yawgmoth. First impressions of the deck is I really like the direction that he's going in, with the aristocratic style draining gain, a little bit of sack mechanics, everything synergizing with the Athreos is really cool. A couple of things that were worrying me at a glance was the lack of sack mechanics in the deck, as well as the Phyrexian Obliterator being the big bomb threat of the deck, being 4 black mana. If we don't have the Tomb of Yawgmoth out, or we haven't got the absurd amount of black mana that we need to play it, it's just a dead card in our hand, so we're not going to be able to play it a lot of the time. It's just something that seems really difficult for this deck to be able to play out, and with the land base having more than 50% of it coming in tapped, it seems like it's going to be very, very slow. And the other problem I have with the mana base, with so many of them coming in tapped, is the fact that they're man lands. So a lot of the times we're going to have to be spending resources for very little gain. Because although it's potentially 12 more creatures in the deck, the amount of mana that we're going to have to pour into those lands just to be able to have them as creatures doesn't seem like it's going to be worth it in the long run. But outside of mostly mana issues, I really like the direction that the deck's trying to go into. So let's see if I didn't improve that a little bit going into the next deck. As you can see here, we still have a lot of the cards that were in the original list. We still have all of the Faithless Lootings, Lightning Bolt, really good bit of removal. I went down a Path to Exile to fit in some more value creatures, as well as down 1 copy of Rally the Ancestors. It's a really, really cool card, and I definitely think it works a lot better in this version of the deck now. The namesake of the deck, Athreos, is also one of the big enablers of the deck, so I'll bump that up to 4 copies. The Cruel Celebrant definitely stayed in. The Dark Confident, or Bob, definitely stays in. With the release of Modern Horizons, we ended up getting the reprint of Carrion Feeder, which is an insanely good sacrifice mechanic in this deck. For 1 black, he's a 1/1 zombie that can't block, and it has sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder, allowing us with the Athreos to just get this continuous loop of creatures going in and out. The 4 copies of Vexing Devil, again, in the colors, I thought it was too good, especially alongside these new sack mechanics. I did take out the Phyrexian Obliterators for 3 copies of Lightning Skelemental, which is for 3, 1 black and 2 red. It's a 6/1 elemental skeleton with trample and haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards 2 cards, and at the beginning of your next end step, you sacrifice Lightning Skelemental. And if it does die, we're basically forcing them to take the damage from the Athreos trigger unless they want us to keep swinging in with a 6/1 trample haste every turn, constantly making them discard cards. And if it does live after combat, being able to sacrifice this to the feeder is another synergy as well. We also have another new addition in the form of 2 copies of Viscera, which is for 1 black. It's a 1/1 vampire wizard with sacrifice a creature and scry 1, allowing us to filter off the top, as well as adding in a sacrifice mechanic. This card is just insanely good for this deck and really helps the consistency of it. Touching on the land base here, we took out the manlands and replaced them with their shockland equivalents. So we have 4 copies of Godless Shrine, which is a plain swamp, comes in tapped unless you pay 2 life. 4 copies of Blood Crypt, which is a swamp mountain, comes in tapped unless you pay 2 life. 4 copies of Sacred Foundry, which is the mountain plains, comes in tapped unless you pay 2 life. 4 copies of Bloodstained Mire, being able to search for all of our shocklands. With tap, pay 1 life, search the library for a swamp or mountain card, put the card onto the battlefield and then shuffle your library. 2 plains and 2 swamps, and the single copy of Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. But you do need to be careful with something like Tomb of Yawgmoth because it is potentially mana fixing for your opponent as well. I've just done a quick mock-up of what I think the sideboard should probably look like. 3 copies of Leyline of the Void, which is for 4. It's an enchantment with the Leyline ability, so if it's in your open hand, you can start the game with it on the battlefield, and if a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard, remove it from the game instead. Obviously, for the other grave matchups. Obviously, for the graveyard matchups, Is It Phoenix, Hogak, there's a lot of decks that are using graveyards at the moment, so Leyline's definitely something that I feel is worth running. Some targeted discard in the form of 3 copies of Inquisition of Kozilek. For 1 black at sorcery speed, target player reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it with converted cost 3 or less. That player discards that card. Inquisition's big brother, Thoughtseize, which is for 1 black. At sorcery speed, target player reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card and you lose 2 life. And the last thing I want to touch on here was cards that I thought synergized really well with the whole Athreos theme through the deck. And that's cards with Evoke. So you're going to be able to play these guys for their Evoke cost. They're going to come in and you're going to immediately sacrifice them. But because of the Athreos trigger, we're then potentially going to be able to get them back and then do it again. So we have 2 copies of Wispmare, which is for 3, 2 and a white. It's a 1/3 elemental with flying. And when it comes into play, you destroy target enchantment. Or you can play it for Evoke cost of 1 white. The same is true for the 2 copies of Ingot Chewer, which is a 5 mana 3/3, which comes in and destroys an artifact, Evoke for 1 red, and 2 copies of Shriekmaw, which is for 5, a 3/2 elemental with fear, and when it comes into play, you destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. Evoke for 2. So being able to loop these through the Athreos trigger could just be crippling for our opponents depending on what they're playing. But that is just a quick mock-up of a sideboard. Depending on your meta, it could change a lot, but I just thought this sideboard as a starting point would be really useful for the deck. But that is the sideboard. That is the main board of my improved version of the Mardu Aristocrats deck. Aiokii, I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you guys like the cards, didn't like the cards, if you agree or disagree with any of the choices that I've put in here, let me know in the comments. If you have a deck list that you want to submit to the Deck Doctor series, put it down in the comments along with what's wrong with it, what it's not doing, how you want it improved. Put it in the comments below and I'll add it to my ever-growing list of deck submissions. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching, guys. As always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to see new videos as they were released. If you like what I do and you want to support the channel, you can throw me $1 on my Patreon at patreon.com/ZandersQuest. And I will see you guys in the next video. Keep questing, guys.